Oh, hello everyone, and welcome again to another episode of M365 Voice. My name is Mike Marani,
I'm Sarah Hazy.
And I'm Antonio Maya.
and today we have a very special guest joining us, Jared Matfess, a good old friend, an expert in the M365 world. Jared, welcome aboard, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So yeah, Jared Matfess, I've been in the Microsoft space for a couple decades now. I was a former Microsoft MVP, Office Apps and Services for a bunch of years. Bounced around between industry and consulting, and right now I'm working for AvePoint. I'm an AI architect. As you can imagine, all the excitement around Copilot and getting ready for Copilot and how to get value out of it. So most of my day is spent talking to customers about how do you get value out of this new capability, what are some personas you might want to target, and what are some guardrails you might want to be aware of. So yeah, appreciate you having me.
I'm excited to talk about this. And I love how Mike, for everyone else's benefit, when Mike introduces you, Jared, as an old friend, that just means we've known each other a long time. He's not referring to your chronological age.
No,
See,
no,
I
not
would
the age at
immediately hit the
all.
reject button on that. Is Mike, come on.
Not the age at all. We're still very, very young, all of us here. We've
That's
known
right.
each other for a while.
For a
We've
long
known each
time.
other a long time. Yes.
So you have been really active in doing what you call them the Microsoft AI Wars episodes. And they've been like when I read each title and each episode you publish or you talk about in different conferences, they're really fun titles. Do you want to just give us an
They're
overview
great.
of what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, really well done.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so it was funny. I was at my previous company. I was on a call with our Microsoft account team, and we had just signed the agreement for early access preview for M365 Copilot. And the biz app seller was trying to sell our CTO on, hey, you need to buy Copilot Studio licenses. And I was watching the confusion of as he's explaining the capability, our CTO is like, well, no. We just gave you money. Like we just literally signed a contract. You have $108,000. We bought 300 seats. Like I don't understand what you're selling us now. We have Copilot. We're all set. And as I was watching the back and forth, I'm like, man, like I imagine that's probably the norm right now in terms of like Microsoft, like branding everything Copilots. And I'm a big Star Wars nerd, and I kind of like start chuckling, thinking like we're literally being attacked by Microsoft with all these copilots, and they all are kind of these bots, and they're all kind of the same thing. So I thought it might be fun to come up with a little, set of sessions, kind of back from my old MVP days of helping organizations, help people understand what are all these copilots, and like if you're, a CTO or a director of IT, and you're managing a budget, like what do you do right now? Like, how do you figure out what to invest in? Because Microsoft, no offense, like they'll say like you should buy everything, but the practicality of that isn't real, right? I mean, everyone's trying to do more with less. These copilots are expensive, and so like, how do you position it? So I thought like, man, like it'd be fun to put together an internal presentation, and then I kept doing play on words with the Copilot theme, and yeah, it's kind of evolved and taken on a life of its own. And I'm kind of skirting some of the copyright-ish things. Like I've got some music that plays in some, I've got some graphics and images that might be, I don't know, they don't violate content policy, but they're gray area. So I've been having a lot of fun. Like it's been just sort of a fun thing, and it helps me understand the topic at a greater level of detail than I would if I was just researching on my own.
And Jared, that's a key. And I know that's not quick sidebar. We're not here to talk about community and how to really build your acumen, but it is true that many of us choose topics to present on that we want to learn more about because it's a vehicle for us to learn it if we're going to present on it. And it's not that we learn it and then we present or then we submit to speak on it. We always submit to speak on it first and then say, oh, bleep, now we have to learn all of the detail. And I just want to say that that's common. That's what we all do.
Yeah.
So I can plus one on that. So here's what has a fun little other tangent. So we just completed a book for Wiley on M365 Copilot. It's Copilot at Work. It's coming out in like January-ish. And I was one of 4 authors on the book. Very first time ever writing. I had no concept of what amount of work that would take and what that process looks like. I learned really fast that there's no money in making and writing books, and it's a crazy process. Like that was like I learned very, very quickly. And I found myself in a situation where I had to cover for another author that wasn't able to get his chapter done in time. And it was around Copilot Studio. I knew nothing about Copilot Studio. I was like, well, I guess I'll spend this weekend drinking Red Bull, watching videos, and then writing and figuring all it out. And I ended up doing that. I had a really fun time, like big under the. I feel like I was back in college. Like I'm under the gun. I got to get this chapter done in a couple days. Like, got to move as fast as possible. And I really loved it. And I started to really enjoy Copilot Studio. I was like, wow, there's a lot more capability here than I was aware of. And so I'm a little bit dumb, but I also signed up to write another book that's coming out in like June, July next year on
Glutton
Copilot
for
Studio.
punishment.
So like the thing is like I live in Connecticut and it's starting to get cold. And like I know between like November 20th and like April, it's really cold. I don't like going outside. The dogs don't go like going outside. So I'm gonna have some time to write. But yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment. I don't know what I'm learning now. It forces you to learn the subject.
I've done
at
the
such a deep
co-authoring
level.
on a book, and it is a glutton for punishment, and it is
is.
hours and hours and hours of time to write something.
Yeah.
And you're right, there's no money in it. And the glory in it is literally what you just shared.
Yeah.
But it is a labor of love to be able to give back and to produce something. So I that respect that. And all of us have been under the gun where it's like, I need to learn it because I need to suddenly write on it. I need to present it. I need to be on a podcast to talk about it.
Yeah.
What
It's
am
Just in time.
it's a great point. Like I'm just to talk about that for a second. I'm reading a book right now called The Diary of a CEO, and it's like 31 different kind of lessons, if you will, on leadership. And the second one is if you want to master something, teach it. And that kind of resonated a lot with what we're saying there, where
Yeah.
if I want to really learn something, okay, I set myself up with a commitment to teach it, like whether it's a session at the conference or a workshop or
Yeah.
something, and then I have to learn it. And
Well-
it's almost that pressure forces me to learn it, but I want to learn it. So it's kind
Yeah,
of
no.
it's a
That's
good
how
way to do it.
That's how I got my start in the community, like a bunch of years back. So I used to go to community events. I'd sit in on, the amazing speakers. You'd have like Scott Hillier and Andrew Connell. Like those are the folks that I wanted to emulate. But I always struggled in their sessions because those guys are so sharp, so technical that a lot of times their sessions are like the 300, 400 level. And that's really hard if you're getting started. So what I started focusing on is like the 100, 200 level. And I'm going to date myself a little bit, but like, hey, here, like get a content editor web part, point it at an HTML file, include some JavaScript and have it create the little web part for you. A very simple, like go get the list data and present it in a table. I'll tell you, like, a very simple example, but like those guys wouldn't cover that because that's, they're talking about like authentication and pulling these other packages, and it's like they're way further ahead. But like the average sort of SharePoint person was like, would appreciate my sessions because I'd walk you through like, hey, if you know nothing about this, I'm the guy for you. Like I'm going to teach you like step by step. And yeah, I don't know. It forced me to learn it. Forced me to learn how to explain it using very simple language and very simple examples. And I don't know, that's kind of always been my thing. And sorry, I'm a tangent person. Where I really learned that, though, interesting enough, was college. Like when I was in college, I was in a program. It was interactive information technology. We did website development. I was one of those kids that didn't want to go to college, but my parents forced me. Either you go to college or you're not living at home. And one of my professors had taught the value of being able to communicate things very easily, because if you don't, there's actually very severe consequences in some situations. And they gave the example of the Challenger explosion. The Challenger exploded because of an O-ring, but an engineer had actually caught that, but was not able to communicate, articulate like that there was a risk and issue because he's speaking in so many technical terms. And so it really reinforced to me that while it's amazing to talk about technology and features and functions, it's really also an incredibly valuable skill to talk in plain language that people can understand, so your point doesn't get lost. So I've always kept that. So a lot of my talks are very like, here are the two things you got to know. Like it does this or does that. Like that's just my style, because I want to make sure people don't have it, they're not overwhelmed with information. So sorry, lots of fun tangents.
Oh, yeah. Magnificent sidebar. But going all the way back to your AI wars, can you share some of the titles of some of the sessions that you've been building? Because they're a lot of fun.
So my first one really started with Attack of the Copilots. Like that was the one that started kind of the spark that started it all. And with that one is really about, looking at the full ecosystem of the various co-pilots. And what I did too is I found, when I was talking with customers, a lot of them are enterprise accounts. They'd have like a full Microsoft account team. So the way I would organize and talk about the co-pilots is based on your account team. If you've got a modern work specialist, here's what they're talking to you about. If it's a biz app specialist, this is their focus, because I tried to apply the people lens on top of the technology lens. And then a lot of the content in that particular topic is around understanding personas. And while, personas if in case you're not familiar, persona is kind of a representation of an individual within your organizations. It's a mix of sort of title and attributes and key characteristics. And while it's not perfect, it does help you get at that starting point. Like, for example, personas for M365 Copilot. It's, your typical back office workers, people in, HR, IT, legal, operations. Like, you want to target those folks. But then you might have people that are responsible for sales or for customer outreach. And for that, you might look at either Copilot for sales or Copilot for service, because those individuals need to keep CRM up to date. So really talking about like the people and sort of the outcomes of what they're trying to accomplish with this technology. That was my original, like, hey, like these are all the co-pilots, like be aware they're more coming. That was episode, and for whatever reason, I think I've got such a memory block of not enjoying episode 1, even though I saw it multiple times in the theaters, that I was like, let's just kind of skip over that. Anakin was kind of annoying. Jar Jar Binks was not fun. Let's go right to Attack of the Co-Pilots. Then my second was Revenge of the Clippy. And so it was one of those, like, if you've already got hooked on Copilot, like your account team has sold you 300 or ish licenses, like, how do you actually get value out of this thing? What does that look like? How do you represent that? Because it's kind of interesting when you think about certain technologies. And ROI is relatively, easy. There's certain measures. That's an example, right? Talk about like a contact center. Contact centers getting customer calls. For the most part, those are measured pretty well in terms of like what's the average call time. And anyone that's helping support a contact center, it's always about how do you get that call time down and the time after the call down. And that's very measurable, right? 8-minute call time, get it down to 6.5. That results in real savings, a true like ROI. When you've got a technology like M365 Copilot and you give it to knowledge workers, your day-to-day tasks are really different. Like what you do in HR versus what I do in HR versus what IT does, it's just kind of like a hodgepodge all over the place. And so that talk was really around marrying up some of the quantitative that you're going to get out of the Copilot adoption dashboard, where you start to see usage, and that tells a little bit of a story, making sure that people are using the licenses. You don't know how though. But you got to marry up that with qualitative, with some survey data, some user interviews, and you got to ask some questions. You got to go crowdsource, like, what are some things that help save you some time? Because at the end of the day, like telling an ROI, you can't make it a science experiment. You're going to fail. If you try to quantify to the dollar, like, if we were seeing a 175% return on investment, you're telling yourself a story. But the reality is that is what a business case is. A business case is telling a story. It's we have 300 licenses. We're seeing 300 active users across a period of time. We're seeing it across these various applications. We've crowdsourced. Here are some of the top use cases where people are finding that they're getting value. This is the measurement in terms of how people feel about not having to do some of those manual tasks. And here's people's interpretation, or people's qualitative feel of like, how is it adding value? Is it making the work product better than if I didn't have this technology? Taking some of those attributes, wrapping it together in a story, is how you justify the expense. Other than that, like, anyone that's telling you that you can get it down to a science, I don't know. I got a bridge I can sell you to. It's the Brooklyn.
I love that.
Yeah.
And the recommendations around thinking about it in terms of qualitatively and quantitatively. And I think the most interesting thing where I really see people clue in is when it's like, oh, have you tried this in Copilot? Have you tried that in Copilot? And the being able to share a real life experience where it helped me to do this thing in narrowing it down is where the magic happens.
I love that you called that out too, because it's different for everyone, different for everybody's working style. Like, so for example, like when COVID hit, my very first purchase, like day one, I was home. I'm like, oh no, I will not have access to a whiteboard. What am I going to do now that I'm working from home? You notice there's a big whiteboard in the back of my picture there. So that arrived at 5:53 a.m. the day after we got sent home because I ordered immediately and it was Amazon overnight, and Amazon overnight, for whatever reason, had to deliver that whiteboard at 5:53. The way that I approach my work is I need to do the initial brainstorm. I'm not good at just going right into a Word document or PowerPoint deck and starting to create content. Like my brain doesn't work that way. Like for me, I need to go start to write things down. I'm very visual as I start to process my thoughts. So I like to use Copilot and Whiteboard to have that initial brainstorming exercise. And it helps me as someone that now works fully remote. I don't have that coworker that I can just sort of swivel to and ask, but I've got that digital assistant that I can say, hey, I'm now doing a presentation that's called, Microsoft AI Wars episode 4. It's going to be about Copilot Studio. I need a bunch of ideas about Star Wars themes and topics to cover and how this all comes together. And I start to visualize that on my digital whiteboard. And then what I really like about Copilot is I'm one of these people that I will get a little bit too close to everything. Like I'll start to really be in the weeds of what I'm putting for sticky notes. It'll go evaluate all the sticky notes that I put on the digital whiteboard and start to give me categories. So it starts to create some structure to my chaos, which is typically like what my coworkers might sometimes do when they're in a whiteboarding session with me. So I find that to be very helpful. Whereas other people might have a working style where, gosh, they can hop right in and start coding or start writing. That's just not me. Like I don't work that well. So I don't know, for me always is Copilot saving me a ton of time, like from an end-to-end perspective. But I will say subjectively, like it does increase the quality of what I produce, which again, to me, it's a huge value.
Yeah, and I always say this to everyone I talk to about Copilot is you have to pick, it's a relationship. You're gonna have to pick how you're gonna use Copilot. You're gonna have to discover each other with that. And it's not gonna do the work for you. It's probably gonna help you do things better. It's probably gonna help you start something. It depends on how you work. So you are going to define your relationship with the Copilot, and you're going to define if you want to put an ROI around it, if we can really measure it, which is really hard, like you said, to measure that, you will be able to say, yeah, maybe it helped me because if I can't do, for example, a really nice PowerPoint presentations, but Copilot helped me when I focus on the content and not the design, that's an added value.
Yeah.
Or like you said, the whiteboard, how you can categorize things with Copilot. So those are really great added values that you're going to have to define how you're going to use Copilot to kind of take advantage of that relationship.
No, the way that you said it's a relationship, which means it's complicated, and how everyone uses it is different. I love that, Mike.
Yeah.
I agree with you, and I don't mind self-deprecating at times too. Like I'm really terrible in Excel. I'm just like wherever like Excel and me just don't get along, I struggle like greatly. And I had a situation where it was a quick turnaround. We had to grab a bunch of data, and long story short, like I had to do some screen scraping of data from a website, and it got the data, but it was really not usable in the format. And I had it, but I was like, man, if I could break out this one column into 4 columns and there were some separators, like that would make this data much more usable. I can have it in a table. I had no idea how to do that. Like I just didn't know, like I don't know Excel formulas, but I said like, hey, Copilot, can you please break out this column into 3 columns? And I gave an example of what I wanted it to be in each column. And it came up with a formula for me, honestly, in like 15, 20 seconds. Whereas I would have spent a ton of time on Google and watching YouTube videos and probably cursing about it not working quite right. And just the fact that like I had end to end done in like 5-10 minutes, which would have been an hour. Like it's a great, and right, that's a story. It's a good story about how Copilot helps save. And you got to collect those stories to tell. So you prove your ROI is a bunch of these little stories.
Yeah. The Excel example is a good one. Like for me with Excel, I can never remember how to do a pivot table. I have to learn how to do it every single time I need to do a pivot table. But with Copilot, I can ask it to do it, and I have it in a couple seconds. It's that helping me to format my data or even get some insights from the data, simple ones. It's really good for that in Excel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do, of course, as I'm a tangent person. I have a funny little story about Copilot and Excel, though. So, I told you I was co-authoring that book, and I, of course, inherited the Excel chapter, which I wasn't supposed to. Like I was supposed to just do like the fun chapters, but I got tasked with Excel, and Excel was in preview, and not generally available until just very recently. And so its features were rather limited in terms of what it could do. And I actually used an example of how you need to sometimes understand that Copilot gets things wrong from time to time. And my first like my first hallucination was in Excel. And so I had all this data. I said, hey, Copilot, I asked it, what kind of charts can you create? It said, oh, I can create bar charts and scatter plots and pie charts. And honestly, of those three, I only know what 2 out of 3 of those are. I don't know what that scatter plot is, but I did know what a pie chart is. I was like, oh, great. Copilot, can you please create a pie chart of my data? It immediately came back with, I'm sorry, I can't create pie charts. Here are the steps you can take to create a pie chart. I was like, but it just said it can create pie charts, and I asked it to do it, and it said it can't do it. And I put that's in the book because I thought it's a great example of like, to set expectations with users that maybe aren't as understanding of, this technology. Like I always tell people like, hey, this isn't like your bank where you log in, it knows who you are, it pulls your account balance, hopefully that's correct and all that. Like this is a large language model. Like this is like it's gonna speak with authority, but it's gonna get wrong. It's gonna be wrong from time to time.
Which means you should not just set Copilot is to write your annual review.
Right.
Bad idea.
Don't do that.
Oh, that's funny. So when you go and talk to clients and you present it, and you've been presenting those episodes as well, how's the perception? Like, how's the adoption, and how do the people that you talk to and organizations, whether they're small, medium, or large, take on that overview that you've described in your sessions or in your presentations with the clients about Copilot?
What's was kind of fun, I mean, I've gotten of all the talks that I've done in the past, I don't know, 10 plus years of being uncomfortable, getting out of my skin, and like presenting in front of like people. This has definitely been the most fun that I've had, and the feedback I get is like, man, like I'm glad it's not just me. That's the kind of a common reaction that I get of like feeling overwhelmed right now with there's so much being pushed at people, between, just chat GPT, custom AI applications. The word AI and Copilot is being just slapped on everything, whether it's Microsoft or outside the Microsoft ecosystem, and just trying to just set the expectation that like the reality is most organizations are not fully adopting this technology yet. Most organizations are really in that experimentation mode right now. They're kind of kicking the tires. They're trying to ideate on use cases. They're trying to prove value. Especially like publicly traded companies, like their health is just such a tough standard in terms of justifying their expense. So it's a lot of experimentation this year. And so, if you think about like, hey, like the large Copilot deployments, they're few and far between. Like obviously some of the larger SIs are certainly quote unquote all in, some of the larger Microsoft partners. But when I look at actual industry, I think people are still trying to figure out like what are the killer use cases. And I think we're going to be in that holding pattern for a little bit longer. Like I don't think it's going to be all of a sudden be, like an E3, E5 where everybody gets it. There's a lot of expense to this. And I think what's going to be very interesting to watch play out is, if you look at some of these specialized Copilot products, like Copilot for sales or Copilot for finance, those actually require you to have an M365 Copilot license in addition to a second license for the specialized one. So you start stacking these up, your costs are really stacking up quickly, and start to justify double or tripling your E3, E5 or A3, E5 equivalent. That's pretty hard. Like that's not something you can just get approved on a whim. So I really think we're going to have another year at least of just experimentation and not a ton of large scale deployments. I think, like giving like rule of thumb, if it's like a 30,000 person organization, you might see like 1,000 licenses at like the upper, but I don't think you're going to see the 20 to 30,000 like a full E3, E5 for a bit.
Well, and I also
Jared,
think that the cost right now is significant and it's new to market. So just like with anything in all kinds of industries, when you're new to market for something that is this big a technology game changer and this expensive for Microsoft to build, you're not going to see that cost come down. Yeah.
Right. We've found with a lot of our customers, they've just gone to E5 licenses in the last year or so. So going to their executives or board and asking for additional X funding for Copilot is hard. Like that's a hard thing for a lot of companies to do.
Well, and it's more than just licenses too. I mean, the other thing, the other piece of this, right, is I keep telling folks, this is not a product that you just do a one and done training on. You're really talking about like transformation. It's a different way of thinking about your work. It's a different way of actually engaging with your work. It's about building up new habits and breaking old habits. And it takes a certain degree of change management that I don't think we've typically see for a lot of the other Microsoft products. Like even like Teams, like certainly like there's a little bit of a little more stick than carrot, I think, at times with Teams and COVID and all that accelerated the adoption. But you know, relatively still, like it has a similar experience to making a call or like a Skype call or whatever. It's not too far off, but when you're telling people that they're no longer like opening up Word and finding an old copy of something, but they're opening up Word and starting to do a prompt, and that's a little bit different. And
It's a mental shift for people to do.
It's huge. And also, I think the other thing is helping people understand that the marketing, I'm going to say this with all due respect to Microsoft, but the marketing of Copilot and the polished videos are way better than anything I've been able to replicate in the real world. Like, I'm sorry, like,
Agreed.
I'm a big PowerPoint snob, and like I can't make amazing slides with Copilot. I'm faster at doing it myself, but it's really good at helping me build the outline. And I usually do that in either Word or whiteboard. And it's also really good at helping me to build slide notes. And I'll do that in Microsoft Word as well. So, but it's not building me this super polished presentation that I'm going to go present to leaders or anything or my customers. Not at all. It's not there yet. It's an evolving product.
Jared, I was going to ask, I think you've already answered some of this, but I was going to ask, where do you see Copilot or Microsoft with Copilot going next year in 2025?
So I feel, and maybe I no longer have access to insider information, so I'm a good person to ask, and I'm not under NDA for a bunch of things. I don't have MVP privs. Right. But from what I'm seeing, I think the push for Copilot Studio is going to be what you're going to hear about next year. And here's why. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. I'm in the middle of the book, but the really amazing thing about all this about Copilot, and call it Gen AI as well, people like immediately think about, oh, it's going to help be this like assistant. It's going to go do tasks for me. But it's also this paradigm shift. We're moving away from, web, mobile, graphical user interface, DOS, to this new, natural language is the new user interface for work that we do. And naturally extending that to other line of business applications that are maybe cumbersome or people don't enjoy interacting with, there's a lot of value in that. And I feel like if you've been around long enough where we build intranets, where we used to have like easy ways to, see what your PTO balance is and building all these custom web parts, imagine using conversation to go find out what do you have for PTO, which holidays do we have time off? Hey, can you go start helping me get my expense report? But then what's even bigger, because I think that's a big shift in itself. But the other opportunity that I also see is the fact that this technology understands language, right? So it's it can get great. Like you don't have to have perfect grammar. The other fun thing about knowing language, it knows more than just English. And I know we always kind of joke about the Canada and the French requirements, but if done well, this technology has the potential of helping organizations find talent that they wouldn't normally be able to put into certain roles, and to help kind of level up their ability. And then, like, what I mean by that, so like my wife's a nurse, and so for her, like, actually English is her second language, and a key part of her job is charting, right? Filling out information about patients and all that. And if English isn't your first language, you're doing a mental translation in your head of like your native tongue to English. Then anyone that speaks multiple languages tends to tell me that that's sort of they gravitate towards the language they know, and they do a mental translation. But they always struggle, and especially medical field, you want to get the terms correct and all that. Imagine though if you can have people that can communicate in their native language in near real time and be able to have that perfectly translated to whatever language like you can unlock talent that you couldn't normally put in certain roles because language was a barrier. So you remove that barrier, you unlock some amazing talent. Like that, I think, is like where the future of this is eventually going to go. It's not there yet, but like to me, that's why like, man, like that is super killer. So the long story short to your question, I feel like Copilot Studio is going to be pushed a lot. I've been dabbling right now with integrating with ServiceNow, which is a huge pain in the butt, but it's a fun challenge to go solve for. But using natural language to be able to quickly, put a ticket in, or to go get, information about a ticket, or hit up a knowledge base, reach out of the M365 ecosystem to other line of business applications, ton of value in that. So
I love that.
Love
Very
it.
cool.
This
And
was
I
so
agree
cool,
with your
Jared.
language thing, your language comment, because it will always understand my typos. Because I do a lot of typos and I do the prompt and there's a lot of typos, and it would come back with like,
Yeah.
oh, it really did understand that.
it really does. Yeah.
So, sidebar, another tangent. I was reading a couple weeks ago, Microsoft recently introduced the ability to translate from multiple languages to Inuktitut, which is one of the native languages up north that the Inuit speak here in Canada. So that was kind
Wow.
of neat.
Oh,
Yeah, not a language you see
that's pretty
often.
cool.
No.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. We have started in Canada. It's big sidebar, but we have started in Canada to see not only English and French in signs, government signs, but also Inuktitut as well, like below it, which is kind of cool.
That's
So
super
yeah,
cool.
Microsoft and probably Copilot can translate to that now too.
That's incredible.
Kind of
I
neat.
love it. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Well, love this episode. A lot of knowledge, a lot of information, a lot of fun stuff you shared with us. Jared, it was awesome having you here. Thank you for joining us.
Super. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure
Great to
to
have
get
you.
chat with you.
All right.
Thank you, Jared.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.